we're going to get started, and to say a few words, Bruce Spann.
Thank you, Jeff. Yes, good morning, everyone, and pleased to see everyone be here this morning. My name is Bruce Spann, Spann and Associates. We're a civil engineering firm. We've been providing design and construction management services on many of the major projects throughout southeastern Wisconsin, and I'm really pleased to be here today to be a sponsor of this morning's breakfast meeting. And I'd like to thank Jeff and Wisconsin With Politics with Politics and WisBusiness.com for the opportunity to sponsor this morning and our great panel that we're going to be hearing from today. I'd like to, as part of, I know this is a transportation, so I'd like to tie something in with Black history that also does tie into transportation today by telling you a little bit about a gentleman named Granville T. Woods, who was born April 23rd, 1856. Granville was an inventor who held more than 50 patents in the U.S. He was the first African-American mechanical and electrical engineer after the Civil War. Self-taught, he concentrated most of his work on trains and streetcars. One of his notable inventions was a device he called the synchronous multiplex railway telegraph, which relied on ambient static electricity from existing telegraph lines to send messages between trains and train stations and moving trains. His work assured a safer and better public transportation system for the cities of the United States. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to you, Jeff.
Yeah.
Okay, and thank you once again for attending this morning.
Thanks a lot, Bruce. Okay, here I am. Thanks a lot, Bruce. So I'm Jeff Mayer from WisPolitics.com and WisBusiness.com. And so why are we having an infrastructure event here? Well, because it's one of the greatest infrastructure projects in state history. And there was a fair amount of government money involved in it, right? So government money is a big driver of infrastructure. The infrastructure bill that was signed into law last year is sweeping in many ways, tens of millions of dollars, not just for roads and bridges, but for airports and rail and water infrastructure and EV charging stations. I mean, it goes beyond certainly the normal transportation infrastructure bills that are passed in Congress each year, although that's happening too. So to get a handle on all of this and to try to sort it out and to try to figure out how Wisconsin can make the most of these federal dollars and combined with the state dollars and the local dollars, and to try to make the most of this, I thought we should have an event like this. And so, I want to thank Bruce and our other sponsors, WTBA, the Wisconsin Asphalt Pavement Association, Transportation Development Association. Thanks very much for helping. And our great panel here. We're going to talk to each of them about, the particulars of the infrastructure bill and what it will do, in their areas of expertise. So going from starting at the end there with the Madison Mayor, Mayor Rhodes-Conway. Please welcome the Madison Mayor. Thank you very much. Then we have the Milwaukee County Executive, David Crowley. Wisconsin Transportation Secretary Craig Thompson. And Jeff Stone of Kapur. He's also a former GOP lawmaker. He's also was with the Public Service Commission, headed the Water Division, and he's now a commissioner with NMSD. So thank you very much. So let's just start off with you, Mayor Rhodes-Conway. What will this infrastructure bill mean to the city of Madison, and how can city of Madison and other cities like yours in Wisconsin make the most of the infrastructure dollars?
Well, let me start by saying thank you for the invitation. It's great to be here with all of you. And I have to say it's very odd to be in this building without thousands of other people. It feels very quiet to me. There ought to be a baseball game going on, right? But this is a really tremendous opportunity for the city of Madison, for the state of Wisconsin, and in fact for our entire country. The funds that are coming through the bipartisan infrastructure law are going to just be transformative in a number of ways. Firstly, just in getting resources where they're needed. We all know that we've got a tremendous infrastructure deficit in our country, and so to have more funds flowing through to fix the infrastructure that we've got, improve our cities, and thus improve our economy is really, honestly, it's a blessing to have a federal government that understands the need for this investment. There's a number of ways that I think we collectively can make the most out of this funding. And I think this is possibly the most important question of the day, so I made a list. And the first thing that I think is really important for us to do as a state and for Madison to do as a city is to compete for the non-formula funds, right? There's money that's going to come to us by formula. We should use that well, but we also should be competing for the funds that are not necessarily going to come to Wisconsin. We should capture as many of those as we possibly can to invest in Wisconsin and to invest in Madison. We should, thank you, Secretary, get the funds to local governments very quickly. And I actually do want to appreciate the Secretary because WisDOT is already working on this. We've already had communication about the timeframes and what we need to do to get our projects considered, and I really appreciate that. I think it's absolutely critical to get the money to the level of government where we can put it to use and put it to use quickly. It's also really important for us to choose projects at every level that center climate and equity. This is an opportunity for us to combat climate change and to invest in our disadvantaged communities, but that takes planning and it takes thought, and it won't happen automatically. So we need to make sure that we're choosing the right projects and that we're designing those projects so that they have a positive impact, both to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions and to bring funds into our most disadvantaged communities and to improve infrastructure in our disadvantaged communities. That's something that I think has got to be front and center for every single project that gets funded by this bill. We should take a fix-it-first approach. That means fix what you've got before you build new, right? We know that we've got infrastructure that has a bunch of deferred maintenance. We know that we've got roads and bridges and transit and on down the line, right, that needs work. Let's work on that before we make our problem bigger by building new things that we'll have to care for in the decades to come. And we should leverage this funding as much as we can to boost local economies and our local workforce. This money can come into our communities and it can help circulate in our communities and build our economies. And that's why it's so important that we get the money to local firms, that our state and also our cities focus on contracting locally, contracting with disadvantaged businesses, getting that money circulating in our communities, hiring people who live in our communities so that we can realize the economic advantage of these funds for years to come.
All right, thank you very much. Milwaukee County Executive Crowley, what's it going to mean to Milwaukee County, and how can Milwaukee County make the most of the federal dollars?
Thank you for that question, and thank you everyone for joining us and allowing me to be here as well. I would say that that's probably one of the worst open-ended questions you can ask a politician because we could be here forever when you think about the amount of.
But I know that you're disciplined enough to keep it short.
Yes, I will. But I think this is significant for this community. One, we think about this bipartisan infrastructure bill. And I think the mayor touched on this a lot, it's one, we're going to be able to make investments in long delayed projects. When you look at our bridges, when you look at roads, rail, port, airports, anything related to transportation, we have for decades been putting off a lot of these maintenance costs. And so for us, it's going to give us the ability to really make solid investments in a lot of our traditional transportation modes as well. But also I think it's going to help us create even more partnerships. How do we work with the state? How do we work with our local municipalities to actually identify projects that's going to actually move this community forward? I think that is going to give us a great amount of ability to do that while focusing on equity, while focusing on climate change and economic justice, as well as good paying jobs. And so when we think about Milwaukee County, what has been going on in the last decade, the locations of where people shop, the locations of good paying jobs, where people are, it has always changed. And I think that with this opportunity with the infrastructure dollars, it gives us the ability to really also focus on how is transit a part of all of this? How do we get people to these jobs, to the medical centers, to the recreational centers so they can spend their dollars, but also realize that this is one of the greatest places to live, work, and play. But it's going to take all of us really coming to the table. I think that when you think about the safety issues related to driving right here in our own community, this gives us an opportunity to work with the city of Milwaukee. How do we curb reckless driving? How do we make all modes of transportation safer? Whether you're walking, whether you're biking, whether you're taking public transit, whether you're in your own car, we need to figure out ways that we bring all of these things together. And more importantly, like, how do we use these dollars to look towards the future? You know, you can't build new right now when we see that the infrastructure right in front of our face is literally crumbling. And I have to say that the secretary and many of the local municipal leaders have all come to the table about how do we kind of pool our resources together to look at different projects related to transportation, related to our roads and bridges, so we don't continue to have these problems in the future. And so I could go along and talk about projects, but I at least want to allow you an opportunity to ask me some questions. So.
Well, yeah, I'm going to ask you the toughest one. Okay, let's go to Jeff Stone first before I go, as I have a little plan here. So let's go to Jeff Stone. So Jeff, you're not necessarily, you're representing a lot of interest, on MMSD, and you're involved in the industry through Kapur. So what does that mean for, the industry? What does it mean for things that MMSD does in terms of, water infrastructure?
So one of the things I would say, kind of feeding off of what's been said here, is looking at these issues in a broader way. One of the things we do at MMSD is we represent a number of communities. We actually extend into other counties, watersheds that go beyond the specific area that we serve. So we have to look together and say, where are we going to spend dollars that they have the biggest impact? Where is it going to benefit the most? We've got to be smart about that. I think we have one of the leading sewerage districts in the country. We've got Kevin Schaefer there, who's really well known across the country for that skill. And we need to build that across the board in our other communities. Being a politician, I can say this, sometimes we tend to get a little siloed. We're more concerned about the area we represent. We've got to have that broader vision. And part of that's going to be required here. Communities, some of the communities, the larger cities, Milwaukee County, are maybe more used to accessing grant dollars at a federal level. But we've got a lot of smaller communities that aren't used to going after federal dollars or complying with federal grant regulations. And so we need, that's one of the areas where I think the industry needs to step up. We also need to look for partnerships between communities and other levels of government to say, how can we optimize this? And finally, I'd say we need to build a plan across infrastructure. When I was at the water division of the PSC, it was so clear to me, you do a water project, a lot of times there's a standoff between the DPW and the water utility. Who's going to do the project first, because somebody's going to get the bill for repairing the road. And so a lot of times the water utility will wait until there's a road project. We've got to say, what's the important infrastructure that needs to happen? How do we coordinate those? And that's how I think we can focus on getting the biggest bang out of these dollars as they come in. Let's get really smart about working together and coordinating our infrastructure investments so that we don't tear up a road right after we've rebuilt it.
All right, well, let's go to Craig Thompson, the Wisconsin DOT Secretary. So you're presenting the statewide view on what all these tens of millions of dollars can do for state jobs, state infrastructure. How do you view this? How do you view this task ahead of you?
Thanks, Jeff. And I also want to thank everybody for having this really important discussion this morning. I think part of all of this is going to be getting information out getting different leaders and everybody the right information so that we can work through all this together. So really appreciate this opportunity this morning. As the mayor said, the county executive said, as Jeff said, what is interesting about, there's a couple of things that are interesting about this compared to federal bills or funding of transportation in the past. This is looking at quite frankly, beyond transportation, broadband, water, lead pipes, some of that, but within transportation, all of it at once. So our airports are going to receive, or our funding for airports in Wisconsin, we're looking at probably about a 60% increase in airport funding. Transit is looking at about a 30% increase in transit funding. Our money and the mayor made a great distinction about formula money and then competitive money. And so the money that we're going to be getting through the formula, and this part's fairly traditional stuff for us. It is a 5-year reauthorization, which is when federal government's working, that's how it's supposed to work. So we're going to be getting, over the next 5 years, for our formula monies, about $1.1 billion more than we would have. You might hear the term, people throw $5 billion over the next 5 years. That's true too. We would have been getting about 4. This is about another 1.1 on top of that, right? So about $200 million more a year, or about 25% increase there. But that's just for that regular funding that we have for our roads and bridges. Then there's another $45 million a year for the next 5 years, simply for bridges, and that's in a separate brand new pot. And to what Jeff was talking about, and some of the others, both with the bridges and this other money, the federal government, to their credit, has really tried to open up to communities that necessarily haven't had maybe the match or the ability to directly apply for some of these things before. But that's also going to be a huge lift, because it's going to be brand new to a lot of these different communities, and so there's going to be a lot of work to do with our local government partners to do that. But so it does give us the opportunity, as the mayor and the county executive talked about, to look at this from a holistic standpoint. To look at it from our ports and our airports and our rail, and our rail's another one that's going to be a little bit more interesting. It'll come in different ways, but there will be more money for rail as well. So it gives us the ability to take a holistic approach at it, and I believe we're going to be really well positioned for this, for the reason that the budget prior to 2 budgets ago here in Wisconsin, we finally passed transportation revenue for the first time in a generation as well, and that's helped for several reasons. One, at the state level, it got us going, our Transportation Projects Commission going again. So we have projects ready to go on the shelf that we're going to be ready for this federal money coming in. And it also, the local governments have gotten about 25% more increase between their general transportation rates and local road improvement program over the years. And we've been working with them to accelerate some of these projects. So I think we're going to be in a better position at that level as well to absorb some of these dollars. But this is it's coming fast, it's going to be a challenge. But if we do it right, I think it can be transformative.
Okay, so the format for this is I ask questions, and then we'll get some questions from all of you. So I'm not going to hog up the question part of the program, but I'm going to try to set the stage for maybe some specifics. But let's just stay with you, Secretary Thompson, about, last week about this time, President Biden went into Pittsburgh to tout the infrastructure bill, and a bridge fell down. Now, I guess that might have been, well, see, we told you so. But it does point to, there's aging bridges everywhere. I mean, we had one of these bridge collapse in an interstate in Minnesota not all that long ago. So what specifically would this infrastructure bill do to help shore up, aging bridges, replace aging bridges?
Sure. And, no matter when you say that bridge fell down in Pittsburgh, that should never be a "see, I told you so." We will bring up, and we will advocate very strongly for, we have bridges that are over 50 years old. We have bridges that are, if they get to anywhere near a structural issue, we will load post them. And if it's anything beyond that, we will shut them down. That should not happen, no matter what the funding level is. But in Wisconsin, we've got about 14,000 bridges. About 63% of those are in the local system. 37% of those are on the state system. Of the ones that are on the state system, about 2% of ours are in poor condition, and about 10% of the locals are in poor condition. So when we're looking at the spirit of, especially that separate $45 million a year for bridges, and I don't want to presuppose anything, because of this new federal money coming in, we are going to have to put together a proposal on how we're going to spend this, and we're going to bring it to the Joint Committee on Finance. So I don't want to say anything like we are doing this, because it's going to be a collaborative situation. But from our standpoint, I think a good amount of that money is going to go directly to the locals, because that's where the biggest need is right now on the bridges. For the states in the country, we actually got the lowest amount for the bridges, that $45 million a year, which you can, this is true whether you're a glass half full or half empty person. We did this because our bridges were in the tier of being in better shape than some of the other parts of the country. But it's going to be significant money, and when I talked about some of the things that we've done to get us in good position for this, we've started now for a couple of years with the counties working on what we call our low-risk pilot program. And we've looked at bridges that have no significant natural resource impact, no utility impact, no railroad impact, your more straightforward projects, and how can we streamline these and get this process going faster and get that money to go further. And we've been working on that. There's been 15 bridges that have gone through that, which in the grand scope of 14,000 isn't that many. But it has gotten us trained, so when we're going to try to get this money out the door fast to the locals, I think we've done a lot of work to put us ready for that. But so from our bridge standpoint, that's pretty much where we are. But nobody should ever worry about driving over a bridge that's going to fall down. We're confident that will not happen.
Okay, so Mayor Rhodes-Conway, you were telling me, I said we're gonna talk about bridges, and you said, well, I got a bridge to tell you about.
I got a bridge for you.
Okay, so to talk about, I think people will know exactly where this is when you describe it, so go ahead.
Yeah, so this is really an opportunity. I mean, obviously, the Secretary laid out, this is the sort of broader situation, but to bring it down to the ground level, I'm sure the majority of you, if not all of you, have driven over the John Nolan Drive bridges coming into Madison, right? Iconic view of the city, that's a beautiful spot. Well, those bridges are not in great shape, right? And they need investment, they need to be redone. And it's a tremendous opportunity. It's also a really expensive opportunity, right? We've got a project in our capital improvement plan right now is $24 million. And that's just the base infrastructure. We'd like to actually take this opportunity and transform that space to be a welcoming gateway to the city of Madison. It is the most iconic view, right? It's a beautiful spot on the lakes. We want to use it to increase access to our lakes. And in fact, I'd love to see a linear park all the way from Monona Terrace all the way over to Olin Park, right? But this is a really expensive prospect. This is something that we've got out multiple years in our capital improvement plan, and even then, we're not entirely sure how we're going to pay for it, even though we know it has to happen, right? So the funding that is coming through for bridges from the federal government it's the kind of thing that allows cities, not just Madison, right, but cities all across the state of Wisconsin to look into our capital improvement plans and say, what are these critical projects that we can get done now with this federal money, right? Or that we can advance and do sooner than we would have otherwise because this money is coming through. And so I just think this is an incredible opportunity for us to partner with WSDOT and potentially, depending on your situation, with other municipalities nearby to really identify these projects that we can advance and do now to improve our communities. And I'm, frankly, the relationship with WSDOT under Secretary Thompson has been fantastic, and I really look forward to us being able to take full advantage, not just of the bridge money, but obviously of all of this infrastructure money.
All right, there's a little bit of lobbying going on there now. All right, so County Executive...
You can't blame me, right? I'm on the stage with the Secretary.
So County Executive Crowley, what's on your wish list? It's things that have been undone that can be done. Give it some specific project or projects.
Well, one, we've been able to start focusing on our BRT project with the east-west downtown Milwaukee going all the way to the Medical College of Wisconsin. But the other wish list would be to create another BRT line on 27th Street, going as far south as Franklin and going as far north as Fox Point or Brown Deer. And the 27th Street, when you look at that particular street, you have some of the largest population of individuals who do not have access to their own vehicle. But also when you count the many jobs and businesses that are actually on that corridor, this is a corridor that we can get people flowing on that's going to move the economic development and human capital and make sure our economy continues to grow. So that's one of the things that I would like to see. But I think that even doing that BRT, right, when we think about, mitigating the risky driving behaviors that we've been seeing, how does this type of project also help the city into rethinking how our streets look and making it even more safer? But we continuously talk about the possibility also of I-94. What needs to happen between the Marquette interchange and the Zoo interchange? And many people that I've grown up with has told me it's like a dirt road now between there, and it's really unsafe for us and our county deputies. So as we have the conversations about I-94, I want to look at that state highway 175. And so when you look at that state highway 175, in the 80s, when you think about the urban renewal, they were building bridges, and it literally separated communities. So when you look at Washington Heights, the North Milwaukee community, they're separated from Washington Park. People literally have to go 1.5 miles, 2 miles out the way to go to that particular park. So how can we reimagine that? And there's going to be dollars available, reconnecting communities, a pilot program, for us to apply for dollars for a feasibility study to look at what would it take to actually remove these types of transportational barriers to allow for more traffic, for example, for people to walk and be able to be reconnected to their communities. But even when you think about our green infrastructure, we have a great partnership with MMSD. There are going to be dollars available in reducing the amount of heat spots throughout Milwaukee County, making spaces more green. And as many of you know, we have a world-class park system that we have to make some investments in. And I think this gives us the ability to do that through those types of partnerships. So, I can literally keep going on and on because when you think about Milwaukee County and what these dollars can do for us, not just related to transportation, but related to equity, related to our park systems, related to transit. This could be a game changer for us as we think about our future.
Right, not just hard infrastructure. Okay, Jeff Stone, you're our water expert. So, there's a lot of money in here for water. I think most notably, which has been most publicized, is about replacing lead pipes, dangerous lead pipes. So you're familiar with that from your days at PSC and certainly at MMSD. What's the strategy there? Replace them now as soon as possible, or because it's a huge amount of money it would take.
Yeah, we'll have to give some credit to Madison, who was really a national leader on replacing all the lead lateral service lines that they had there. They did that with a lot of foresight. We've seen other communities in the state like Green Bay do that, completed that recently. But now Milwaukee has the largest problem in the state, probably well over 100,000 lead laterals that need to be replaced. Once again, you have to be thoughtful about it. When you start disturbing lead pipes, you can stir up more problems. And so once again, back to that coordination. When are we doing a road project in an area? Can we do the water mains in those areas? Some of them, we were leaders in clean water in this state, but that means that we've got a lot of infrastructure that's 100 years old. It's at the end of its useful life. So let's think strategically about how we replace those water mains, then we do the road project and the laterals simultaneously. So I think that's the way we can get that biggest bang out of those dollars that are coming. And is it reasonable? I think it's going to be aggressive, but I think that if we make that a priority in focusing with the other projects that are going on, hopefully we can make
it's a health issue. So it's huge. Okay, now a broader question. You can't talk about building things without the labor shortage in the state. There's we have the lowest unemployment rate, but it's also, I'm sure we can have tails and tails here of people who can't find the right person for the job they need to get done. So how can these things happen? How can the money be used in a efficient way if there's a labor shortage? And how do you get around that? I'm not going to call on anybody. I can call on County Executive Crowley, but I'm going to call up Madison and give me a break.
So it's a problem, right? But it's also an opportunity, right? Because yes, we have jobs that are looking for people to fill them, but despite the numbers, we also have people that are looking to fill jobs, right? And so I see this as an opportunity to invest in our communities, to get people trained up, to get them connected to good family supporting jobs, at a living wage or higher. And this is something that Madison has been working on for years. I know the Milwaukee area has been working on it for years, right? I think there's a real opportunity here if we can make the connections that are needed between the people who are looking for work, who are looking to get skilled up, the training programs that already exist, right? And then the opportunities that exist in industry. And, you know, you have here in Milwaukee one of the best examples of this. Wisconsin Regional Training Partnership is a national leader on this kind of work. And, you know, we in Madison sort of aspire to be that organized. But no, in all seriousness, I think that it's an issue to be solved, but I see it as an opportunity more than anything else for us to, again, use these dollars to invest in our community and to invest in our people. And I think that, you know, one of the sticking points is to really be building the connections between the training programs so that when people graduate from them, they have connections into the industry, right? And that the industry knows where they can go to hire well-trained people. And that's the piece that we're focusing on in Madison.
I absolutely agree with you, Mayor. And I guess what I would add on to that is, well, we also need to be reimagining how we introduce young people into trades as well. You know, I grew up understanding trades because my dad was a master electrician. I seen him working on houses, on commercial buildings my whole life, and it piqued my interest and it introduced me to the trades. I was actually in the electrical apprenticeship. My dad always reminds me I'm making a lot more money if I was an apprenticeship. But,
Not wrong.
but we have to figure out how we're introducing more young people into the trades, particularly right now. I mean, we have to, because I think we're all thinking about right now, right, when we talk about the labor shortage. But we have to remember that this state is getting old, and more people are going to be retiring. So how do we not only get our young people and those in our own communities to be able to take up the mantle and take these positions, but how do we also market Wisconsin as a place that this is a place that you can come do business. It's a place that you can come stay. Particularly, you know, for me, now that we are not only focusing on those who want to work in trades, but even those who are working in tech companies and things of that nature, right? How do we bring them here? Because they clearly don't have to work on anything physically, you know, on jobs necessarily in whatever state that they may be doing work in. So the question is, for me, is how do we also create the partnerships regionally, right? When I think about the 7-county region, to really help recruit individuals to the Milwaukee area to focus on taking up some of these jobs while also building up our future workforce that is currently here.
Mm-hmm.
All right, well, let's go down the line there. Secretary Thompson.
Sure. I'm going to echo a lot of what was just said. You know, I don't always agree when people say every problem is an opportunity. Sometimes a problem is just a problem. But I will agree in this instance when the mayor said, I do think this is an opportunity. There's no question about it. People have talked about, I mean, we already had the demographics that we've seen coming. We've heard demographers talk about forever about the baby boomers retiring in a smaller amount underneath, and we're realizing that now. But then with what's happened with the pandemic and everybody has talked about the great resignation, part of what that really is the great relocation, right? There's a lot of people that decided, you know, I don't want this job, but I'm still going to work. I just want a different job. I want maybe a better job. And we've also talked for a long time about whether it's STEM and getting more people in engineering and all that, but also more people into the trades. And like the mayor said, I think this is a tremendous opportunity for people that are looking at that right now. You know there is going to be work going on out there. They are going to need you. They're good paying jobs, and there's going to be a lot of them. And so I think it's a tremendous opportunity for people that are looking at moving, going into something else. They should be going into this area because there's going to be work, it's going to be good paying work, and it's going to be there for a while.
Yeah, this isn't necessarily your part of government, state government, but I mean, the training programs that were alluded to here are going to be crucial, from the tech colleges to the union apprentices to all the rest. You know, there is money that's been out there trying to nurture these things, but I mean, I think it's now in sort of a hyper need basis. So I don't know, it's going to take a massive coordination in government writ large. Okay, Jeff, your thoughts on this?
I'm thinking about this building right here. There were a lot of programs that were created to get contractors to get new employees in up to speed. It was a great partnership. But the thing about a project like this is it lasts a few years and then it goes away. We have an opportunity right now to create that next generation. We've got a stream of funding. And we're here in Milwaukee, truthfully, probably the highest, unfortunately, unemployment rate in the state. But you know, when you look across, what are the resources that are going to be valuable going forward? People and manpower are what's going to be there. People can, you know, everybody can get the equipment, we can get the technology, but we need to optimize the people that we have and that human resource. And here's an opportunity to do something that maybe sets us up for a new generation.
All right, before we go to questions, I'm going to follow up with Secretary Thompson. You mentioned rail, and you kind of said, well, we'll talk about that later. So let's talk about that now. I think the last time there was a really big rush of money here, we were talking about a high-speed rail line, you know, and then Governor Walker got elected and Governor Doyle gave it up. So I don't hear people talking about high-speed rail now, but what are the possible benefits or add-ons to passenger rail or improving freight rail?
Yeah, so from the passenger rail front, this is an area that I appreciate the opportunity because we're really excited about some of the things we've been able to do, and we don't always get to talk about it as much, but we've announced, we applied with a joint application to the feds with Minnesota and received over $45 million. And now we've announced that we will, beginning in 2024, have brand new service called the TCMC, the Twin Cities, Milwaukee to Chicago daily round trip. So it goes on the Empire Builder route, which the Empire Builder goes from the Twin Cities all the way out to the Pacific Northwest and back. And you know, with a route that long, it's an Amtrak route. You know, on times get a little more sketchy and those sorts of things. This will be a daily round trip, simply from Twin Cities to Chicago through the area of Wisconsin and back every day, with the stops along the way in Wisconsin. So
wait a minute, I have to interrupt you. Yep. So that would go Twin Cities through the Dells and then on the Amtrak line through Milwaukee?
Yep, Milwaukee and Chicago. The closest stop around Madison would be Columbus, but that route there. And so, you know, we think that's going to be hugely successful. I think there's a lot more to come there. The Hiawatha line between Milwaukee and Chicago is one of the most successful Amtrak routes in the country. Obviously, the pandemic's had impacts on that, but we are now, there have been 7 round trips a day. We've worked with UP, we're going to get to 8 round trips a day. We've got the Muskego Yards project going on there. So we're really excited about that, continuing to improve. And with this federal money, a lot of the money went to Amtrak, it doesn't go to the state. But I know Amtrak is investigating, looking at routes from Milwaukee to Chicago, or I'm sorry, Milwaukee to Madison, sorry, Mayor. Milwaukee to Madison and
Left out, yeah.
and Milwaukee to Green Bay, and so they're going to be looking at those routes. We'll be talking to them. So I think there's a lot of possibilities, and even just commuter rail in Southeast. There's some private groups out that are doing some very exciting work and looking at a private sector model for some more commuter rail in Southeast. So I think for passenger rail, there's a lot going on, and for freight rail, we had. Canadian National gave up some of their lines in northern Wisconsin. Wisconsin Southern, or WACO, just got approved by the National Transportation Safety Board. And so we think we're going to be able to make some great new rail connections in the northern part of the state for freight for a lot of the shippers up there. So we got some interesting things going on.
Right, but the freight thing is crucial because if you take the pressure off the main lines, then the passenger rails trains can run on time. I mean, you know, they're competing now on the same lines with the freight, and that is causing, you know, I can't make the trip, a dependable trip from.
That's absolutely right. And so, like when I referenced that Muskego Yards project, it's going to help the freight, but by helping the freight, it's going to free up that line for the commuter rail down there. So that's a perfect example of what you're talking about.
Okay, so this is kind of like, it leads me to the one big thing. Like, you know, 5 years from now, what will you be able to say or brag about? This was the one big thing we really got out of this money. We wouldn't have got it otherwise. What's the one big thing?
Well, I certainly hope the one big thing is that we got Amtrak to Madison. I think that's definitely on the table. Madison is on Amtrak's map, and I think that with this funding, we may just be able to get that done. And that to me is incredibly exciting. I would have loved to be able to take the train here this morning. And I think it would really open up a lot of economic opportunity for both Milwaukee and Madison. And to increase the ability of folks to travel between our cities easily, I think would just really be transformative. So that's my top of my wish list. Secretary knows we've talked to him about what we can do, and we've talked to Amtrak, we've talked to the feds. I really hope that we can get that one done. But I also hope that we will be able to take all of the funds that will be coming, again, both formula and competitive money through Madison, and really put them to good use to just jumpstart our infrastructure and to put us in a better place. Because unless something changes at the legislature, there's going to continue to be lean years ahead for local governments in Wisconsin. And so we really have to take advantage of federal money when we can to make a difference and set us up in a good place for the future.
Right, and Secretary Thompson alluded to that, this money will still have to filter through the Joint Finance Committee, the legislature's Joint Finance Committee, which is controlled by Republicans. Okay, County Executive Crowley, what's your one big thing you want to brag about in 5 years on this one?
Well, for many of you may know, in Milwaukee County, we have fiscal challenges. And so I would like to brag that we were able to spend these dollars to get a lot done without having to spend local dollars, to be quite honest with you. Because we have a lot of challenges. We have, $500 million in deferred maintenance that we've been continuously putting, kicking down the road for a very long time. And for me, I want to be able to say that we've tackled many of the biggest issues within Milwaukee County in the next 5 years. Whether we're talking about bridge repair, whether you talk about just our infrastructure related to like the courthouse and all those things. But for us, it's being able to relieve the taxpayers because we've been able to receive these dollars.
All right, Jeff Stone.
I think what I think about, 10 years from now, I would like to see the restoration of Milwaukee as kind of that economic engine for the state. And doing that by coordinating the transportation investments that we've already made and are making, and bringing it to really create a holistic transportation system that's forward-looking, that serves commuters in and out of the city, the most valuable transportation corridor as far as freight and through the state, which is I-94, the port of Milwaukee, which is growing and is getting invested in, and then some of the transit alternatives that are going to make it easier for people to move around the city and more efficiently and get to jobs. And I think if 10 years from now we can say we've got Milwaukee productive and leading our state economically, I think that would be a real major win.
Right, right now, we're still largely car dependent. Yeah, there is bus service. Rapid bus transit would, I think, certainly be, that would be a great addition. But until you talked, I just want to ask about MMSD. MMSD, we don't have RPCs, or regional planning commissions anymore, but MMSD is, I think, one of the biggest planning operations, not private, a public planning operation in the state and in the region. And so MMSD is constantly mapping out what the region is going to be looking like in 10 years or so. And so there's a lot of vision making at MMSD. So I'm just wondering about what's going on inside MMSD, thinking about transportation.
Well, I don't know that we think as much about transportation as far as, we're dealing with that water runoff, so when you build new infrastructure, it creates challenges for that underlying stormwater, wastewater infrastructure that we have. And we have a vision there of taking the dollars that we're receiving and using them most effectively around the region. Whether it's retaining water upstream or building more of those areas that the executive mentioned to hold water. And so it's really coordinating with that development and making sure that we don't have problems downstream, we don't have flooding, we eliminate some of those things that have been a cost to the community and the city. I don't think MMSD necessarily plans out transportation, but they try to respond in that holistic way that we've talked about.
Okay, Secretary Thompson, what do you, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, what do you want to be the one big thing to come out of this?
So really quickly, before I get to that aspirational part, there's just one part I didn't want to leave today without mentioning, a little more mundane. But as we've talked about this money, and the president signed it into law, and that's happened, but the feds have not appropriated that money yet. So I don't want anybody just under the misconception that we've gotten that money yet. So we still have to go through that process, and so it makes it a little tricky because the feds also have this rule for a lot of the money, not all of it, but the money you get in that year, you have to spend in that year, or obligate in that year, or you lose it, and then other states can get it. And we've done a pretty good job in recent years of getting money from other states that haven't used it, and we're gonna again. But for us to be able to work with our local government partners and have that obligated in time is gonna be a Herculean lift. And so it's gonna require a tremendous amount of communication, which I think we're doing, and I know we'll do well at that, but I just wanted to mention.
So what is, while we're on the subject, what is the timeline then? When might this money actually get to a local government, and then where it might be able to, a contract might actually be able to be done?
So the federal government passed a continuing resolution. We're still at FAST Act, which was the previous reauthorization funding levels through February 18th. At that point in time, they'll either figure it out or come up with another continuing resolution. Now, what they could do, the appropriations includes, defense spending, all kinds of things. They could break out the transportation part since they've already done this and passed it separately. That would probably be my brothers, but they could do that. So if they do that, then we'll have our plan before joint finance, but we're already working with the locals to solicit projects, so we're ready to go. We're not waiting for that to happen, so that we are ready to go. So we're trying to do these.
So the fall or early next year, or?
Sometime yet this year.
Okay.
One way or another, by hook or by crook, we're going to be getting this dollars. All right, so the aspirational part. I would say, if you look at Wisconsin, some of this gets how you judge it, but we're considered the second most transportation-dependent economy in the country. So when I look at it, what will it mean from now? It will mean that we have no more load-posted bridges in the state, where our agriculture and timber industry doesn't have to go out of their way that they can go over those. Our first and last mile connections that our local government partners provide to all these is going to be attracting more to their area. We're going to have bus rapid transit in Milwaukee and in Madison. We're going to have better passenger rail. We're going to have interstates the ones that are still over 50, 60 years old are going to be redone, and we're going to fix those. All of those things together will mean that we will have a thriving economy. So that's the end result. It isn't transportation itself. It's the output of that, and as transportation dependent economy as we have, if we do those things, we will be in great shape.
All right, well, let's take it out here for questions from the audience. If you're way back there, I can bring a mic to you. But anyway, go ahead.
Thank you, Jeff, for doing this, and thank you, panel members, for doing this. I'm Jerry Durr, I'm the president of the Wisconsin Towns Association. Obviously, we represent the smallest communities in the state generally, and one of our biggest concerns is access to these funds. Our people are generally not used to federal procurement. They really aren't. We're working with them through our association, through our consulting partners, and through the department, and doing what we can. But we're the people that take care of those farm to market, tourist to market, forestry to market, roads out there. And so I'm just happy to have this discussion. This is great. There's going to be a lot of opportunities out there. A lot of you are talking big projects compared to what we're looking at out here. Secretary was right on the money with our bridges. Our bridge program is doing well. As long as we maintain that earmark for local bridges. Culvert replacement is now under ARPA, which we're reminding our people, don't spend ARPA money on something that you can spend bill money on, because the ARPA money has more flexibility. A lot of cases, and I can say that even in Dane County, our culvert replacement is based on failure. Once it starts caving in, then we fix it. And we can't do that with bridges, and of course, my town has been a big beneficiary of the 80-20 bridge program, and that's a procurement program with federal money, big federal money. So I appreciate what you're all doing, and we can take a big advantage, make a big advantage of this money coming in, get as much as we can, get it down to the local level also, which I think before the cutoff was always arterials and collectors, and the locals kind of, you can kind of make it on your own. This goes down to the local level now, and we appreciate that part of it. We appreciate what the Secretary is doing to make that money available to our members also.
So I don't know whether you all heard that in the back, and I'm sorry, Jerry, I should have had a mic on you for your response. But anyway, basically, a concern about culverts, a recommendation to the town association members, don't use the ARPA money, because that's has a lot of flexibility, use these kind of appropriated dollars for specific uses. That's a better use of money, and I think a plea to don't forget the smallest communities when these discussions are taking place. I don't know, who wants to respond to that concern?
So thank you for raising the issue, Jerry, and I think it's actually really important where you started, right, which is that some of our smaller local governments don't have the capacity to engage with the federal government in the same way that Milwaukee and Madison do. And so one of the messages that I've been trying to carry to the federal government, and particularly to the DOT, but also to the EPA, is that lack of capacity and the need for folks at the federal level to recognize that and to be offering technical assistance on these funds as they come through, whether they come through for transportation or for water or for whatever it might be. And to recognize that certainly in Wisconsin, and I imagine in other states as well, that even governments that we would think of as relatively large may not have a federal lobbyist, right? May not be used to dealing with federal grants. And so I think that's a really important aspect. I think we need to continue to ask the federal government to provide that technical assistance. I think we should also be asking the state to help where they can. But frankly, this is a place where the private sector, but also the nonprofit sector, can try and support local governments in even just the awareness of the different pots of money. And I think that's a really important thing because I'm happy to take all the infrastructure dollars I can get in Madison, but we won't be successful as a state if some of those funds don't get down to our smaller communities, and I think that's really important.
Yeah, just so you mentioned this also in your preamble about making sure that locals get the help they need.
Yeah, I think it is a challenge. You're starting to see, I think, some of the associations, I know I've seen where they're focusing a little bit more on grants, grant administration. One of the resources available as a consultant, they'll say, talk to your consultants, see if they have some of that capacity.
That's an ambitious plan, okay.
Got to get that in. But I think that's, the partnerships and, I think hopefully a lot of these funds also bring in the regional planning organizations. So hopefully that information will start to work its way down. But I think that is the biggest challenge here for the smaller communities that aren't used to working through these types of programs. And for us to optimize that, we also have to change a little bit. We tend to be, a lot of local people are, I think, very independent. We're going to take care of ourselves here. But I think that they've got to be open to saying, this is a new program, it's the way that the dollars are coming through, we've got to look at it a little bit different way than what we have in the past. And be willing to
one thing I would add to that is, Milwaukee, Madison, we still don't have the capacity to really go after a lot of these dollars. And what I would say is that this is where I think we have to have greater partnership. I have been in D.C. 3 times in the past 3 months because I believe that no one cares what you know until they know how much you care. So I want them to know how much I care about this community in order to bring these resources back. And so I think that, you saying how do we build the capacity, how we work, I would say, us being, the largest county in the state, we want to support our local municipalities across this state. I think a lot of the times when everybody looks at Milwaukee, they look at us as wanting to be on the island, but supporting your local towns, local municipalities, and all the counties across this state supports Milwaukee as well. And so we are all in this together and bringing back these federal dollars, whether it's to local communities or to the state for it to be divvied up. But I would say, please feel free to call on us to see how we can support, because we're going there. And I honestly believe it's not our job when we're in D.C. to only fight for Milwaukee. I'm fighting for this region. I'm fighting for this state as well.
And if I could just, Jerry, what you brought up, and I talked about it a couple times, it's probably the biggest challenge right now out there is the timing of this money coming in. It's tremendous that we're getting it. It's tremendous that it's being opened up to governments that haven't traditionally done it. But it's going to be, I keep saying it's going to take a Herculean effort. It's going to take so much communication. There's in two ways. One is the money that comes into us at the DOT, right? So we plan on, and again, we're going to have to work out and get it approved, but I think you'll see, ultimately we do this, our plan is, more than half of the money we get, I think we're going to try to get to the locals, right? And of that, generally, there will be, based on our local road improvement program model, there will be panels of local officials themselves, town officials looking at town projects, county officials looking at county projects, and city and village looking at their projects, and they will make decisions in their given areas on how to get that out. So that's one thing, and even from within there, it's going to take a lot of work, and I'll even do it, I'll put a plug in for the engineering consulting. We're going to need consulting engineers' help for a lot of these cars. There's going to be a lot of work out there if you're willing to go out there and do that, because they're going to need the help. But then there's the competitive grant side, and that's a whole new part. And, you know, when the mayor talked about lobbying at the federal level, appreciate that so much. We've asked for the same thing. We're trying to look what we can do to provide more resources. I just want to be realistic. We're not going to be able to provide a grant writer for every single city bill, right? That's not realistic. So at what level can we do, and what other partnerships can we leverage? And so we're trying to look at all those things together, but I do think we've got an atmosphere of trust with the locals that we can kind of be working on this, sort of building the plane as we're flying it, and not waiting. But it's a huge task.
All right, here's a question.
Hi, Kirk Brandt, CEO of Wing Things. This has to do with both the rail application and monies going to local communities. Rail congestion at crossings in some communities is up to 20% of the time they're blocked, which is a problem for first responders and the citizens. We provide a technology solution now to our customers, for example, in Janesville and Pond du Lac, Milwaukee Green Bay. But many of the communities are challenged with, as the people just talked about, trying to get that federal funding because of the resources in the community. Is there a way to pull together a solution where multiple communities can collaborate to get a set of funds? For example, our solution could solve a problem for 100 communities at the cost of, for example, one bridge.
If I could just give a real quick answer, the answer is yes. Whether it's railroad crossings or whether it's other things, if we can find local governments banding together to come up with regional proposals and solutions, that's all the better.
Thank you.
No, hey, watch out. The man with the mic's coming.
Thank you. I'm Brian Mitchell with Michaels Corporation. When we began the discussion, we talked about equity issues and climate. The mayor brought it up. Thank you, Mayor. I have a question as to whether the DBE goals will flow with the federal funds to the local communities and local projects. And secondly, will the DBE program be changed or altered through this bill?
And the DBE program is?
The Disadvantaged Business Enterprise Program that goes with the federal transportation funds.
Well, I don't know, I'm not a lawyer, I'm not an expert, but I do think that we can expect to see the existing federal requirements stay the same, that's my understanding. I don't know, Secretary can speak to the state, I don't imagine things will change there, but I can tell you Madison is a huge priority for us. And so in addition to what we're required to do on any given funding, our Department of Civil Rights is also working very hard to go beyond and to do the education and outreach and recruitment so that, when we hit those questions around meeting a DBE goal, it's not just like, oh, well, we tried, and nobody showed up, right? But it's rather that we've already built the relationships, that we've entered, in fact, I think it's this week, literally in Madison, our Department of Civil Rights is hosting an event for prime contractors and subs to come and meet each other. And we do outreach, we do training, we work with small businesses to help them understand procurement at the local level and at the state level. So we're really trying to make sure that we're raising awareness on all fronts and that we're making the introduction so that when we come down to it and we have a particular project, that we don't say, oh, well, we tried and nobody showed up, but we actually have made the phone calls and made the connections, and we have people showing up to be able to take advantage of those contracts. I think that, frankly, this is something that every local government needs to be paying attention to, and I think it's really important for us to not just meet the letter of the law, but to meet the spirit of the law, and to actually do the work in our communities to make sure that we're working with small local businesses owned by women and people of color in particular. And this is something that we're actually investing our ARPA dollars in. talk about stacking money, right? So we're investing ARPA dollars in building up our small business community. Hopefully that will mean that some of them will be ready to take advantage of these bipartisan infrastructure law dollars. So I think it's a really important approach, and certainly I'm happy to talk in more depth with anybody about what we're doing in Madison.
And just to add to that, I don't think that anything changes with the bill and what the requirements will be, but here in Milwaukee County, I mean, this is an issue that we just have to tackle in general. I think not only local governments, but private businesses have a problem when it comes down to contracting with DBEs and SWIMBs. It's just a fact here in the state of Wisconsin. I mean, you have a particular energy company right here who's been in existence in Wisconsin for 75 years, and they have never had a DBE program. I mean, those are the types of conversations that we really need to be having in general. But for us, we have to change our procurement process, one that allows DBEs and SWIMBs to come into our program, but also have them navigate so they can actually become successful in the future.
You know, and I think, and Brian, you're intimately familiar with a lot of this, but as far as new requirements under that, I think it's largely going to be the same. But, you know, at the state level, at the DOT, one of the dubious honors we've had here in Wisconsin over the past numerous years is we've led the country in what's known as good faith efforts, waivers. So you don't meet the DBA goals, and then you say we made a good faith effort, and you waive those goals, and then you move on. And so we have gone, you know, we've taken on as aggressively as we can to change that. I think it's real technical, some of the things that we're requiring people to have at the time of letting and all that, won't get into all that. But it's really more demonstrating that you truly did make the good faith effort. You know, you didn't just check a box. And we've made tremendous strides on that. Our good faith effort waivers are going down dramatically. We still have a ways to go. But if you, and I've talked with my peers in other states about this that have done better, you have to create the climate, because you have a chicken or egg argument that's going to go on out there. The contractors will say, we want to, but there's just not the capacity. They're not there. Well, until we create a situation where the companies are going in this, know there's going to be the work and there's going to be sustainable work, it's not going to be there. So you get into this chicken or egg thing, and from what I've talked to in other states, the way to do it is to do it. And it's messy, it doesn't make everybody happy all the time along the way, but I think we've already made great strides. And if we look at a project like the I named before East-West here, and we're still going through the supplemental environmental impact statement. So whatever the final design of that looks like, no matter what it is, there should be tremendous opportunity for disadvantaged business enterprises to get a lot of work on that project. And so, you know, it's been a priority of ours that we'll continue to look at. But again, these dollars coming in, just like everything else, opportunity and problem, right? Because we're going to have to make sure we still meet those goals with those larger dollars going in. But by us being intentional about this and being serious about this, I think we're seeing a lot of companies and a lot of the industries out there taking a lot more seriously, doing the things that they need to do. You know, the operating engineers now have took away one of our great people that worked in State Patrol, Joe Davis, who is, you know, working from their standpoint on helping to get that capacity out there. Those sorts of things happening will help to create that. So, you know, I see it getting better, and all this money, once again, great opportunity, but great challenge.
I'll just throw in an advertisement. Tomorrow, MMSD has a capacity building conference, and they have some of the consultants that have worked with the district or suppliers meeting with minority SWIMBY companies in order to say, how can I better participate in those projects? So it is that ongoing effort, and we monitor that on a monthly basis. We look at the contracts that have been awarded and say, how are we doing against our goals?
Bruce, yeah, go ahead.
Yes, just wanted to say related to that, I'm on the DB advisory committee that the DOT's been holding for the last several months, and again, from my side of things, I certainly appreciate that you're looking at good faith efforts and getting those down, and that's great. But of course, that's mainly talking about the construction trades and builders. I'm on the professional services side, and one of the issues that I've been raising is that DBE goals have not been set on, for several years now, on design service projects. Even now, there are projects being that will come out for advertisement in February, but again, there's no DBE goals on those projects. And related to that is what we've been seeing historically too, that we're working on the advisory committee to address, is that in the DBE program, the majority of dollars that are spent for the last several years have gone to non-minority women-owned businesses. So 60% or more of those dollars are going to one category that's greater than all of the rest of the participants in the program. So I certainly would like to see that there's continuing to be more of a balance on making it more equal among all of the DVE participants.
Appreciate your role in that advisory committee, and everything you just said. Those are the things that I think we need to be looking at doing, so I appreciate you bringing it up.
Michael Landrew, University of Wisconsin, Milwaukee College of Engineering and Applied Science. First of all, great event. Thanks to the sponsors, the organizers, and all the panelists. Regarding the $1.1 billion increment that you mentioned, and I think you said 30% for transportation, was that correct?
All of the 1.1 billion will be going for transportation.
All of 1.1, okay, great. Within the next 10 years, there's going to be a massive influx of electric vehicles hitting the road. And how much of that money do you anticipate will be available for enabling electrified mobility, specifically supercharger networks across the highways in the state of Wisconsin?
Very much appreciate that question because, there's so much to get to, and I didn't get to this part. Outside of all of the other money that we talked about, completely separate from that, Wisconsin will be getting $75 million over the next 5 years, or about $15.7 million a year, specifically for electric vehicle charging stations. So prior to this bill passing, we did submit a joint application to the feds with the Wisconsin Economic Development Corporation for a planning grant for $1 million, which we were successful in getting. So we're going through the planning on that. And how many will be, the high speed, the quicker chargers, where you put them, all of that. I think we have to work through it, so I don't want to presuppose where we're going to go. But when people hear about us getting that money, that doesn't mean that Wisconsin is going to spend $75 million on us putting all of those electric charging stations out there. This probably will be us working with private sector in providing good terms and doing those different things where they can, and then us looking at, okay, is there deserts, is there areas here where there would be range hesitancy or that, and making sure that we got coverage all the way across the state.
Another element that's in the bill is there's substantial funding for school buses, probably for electric school buses and for energy efficiency at schools. So that's another opportunity that might really create some benefit along that line.
And I can't let this topic go by without flagging something for all of you, which is that there is a bill in the legislature right now which would severely limit the ability of local governments to participate in this EV revolution. And I do say revolution with purpose, because this is going to transform our transportation sector, and it has to, right? This is critical to our climate future. We at the City of Madison have been doing a number of different things on this front. We are growing our own EV fleet, which means that we have to install chargers in our own buildings and at our own sites, right? One of the things that we do is for any of our employees that have an EV, they can come and charge while they're at work, right? The bill that's in front of the legislature would outlaw that for local government. It makes no sense, right? We are cooperating with our local utility, our local electric utility, MG&E, to put chargers in our parking ramps, right? Makes sense, right? You want to go downtown, go shopping, got an EV, want to make sure that you can plug in and charge up and that if you've got battery to get back home again. That would likely be illegal under this bill because we control the ramps, even though the utility controls the chargers, right? We have I can't talk about EVs without bragging about this. We have the first in the nation electric fire truck at one of our fire stations. It's doing great, by the way. But we have to charge it, right? And we don't own it. It's lent to us from Pierce, who made it right here in the state of Wisconsin. I want them to be successful. I want them to sell electric fire trucks to every city in the country and beyond. But under this bill, our arrangement would likely be illegal. And that's going to hamper their ability to be successful. So I would just, this is a place of growing innovation. This is a place where, as the Secretary said, we can have great public-private partnerships But we can't let the legislature get in the way of that and stifle that innovation. And so it's really important that we leave this space for there to be public-private partnerships and for local governments to do what we need to do to spur that innovation and to get a charging network in our cities, but also throughout the entire state, so that people who own EVs, and I hope there will be many more of them in the future, don't have any hesitancy about where they can go and what they can enjoy in the state of Wisconsin.
All right, question back here.
Yeah, this is for Secretary Thompson. Good to see you, Craig. Wondering if you could provide kind of a reality check or maybe a context check of the impact of this funding within the context of the transportation fund of the state writ large. And we just had a discussion on EVs, and that's going to have an impact on the revenues coming into the transportation fund. There are inflationary pressures right now on the industry that are having an impact on how much the dollars cost. And we're all excited about this new federal money coming in, but it's in the context of transportation fund that has some pressures on it that are going to reduce the amount or have potential to reduce the amount of money coming into it. And then you have pressures on the other side with inflationary pressures on construction costs. And previous administrations, Republican and Democrat, and legislatures have shown that there was a gap in that fund from resources and needs in the state system. So if you could just kind of contextualize, where are we right now, even with this new money? What's the condition of the transportation fund, both short-term and long-term?
Yeah, that's thanks for the question. That's a great point. So, as we talked about, this federal money coming in from a federal standpoint will be about a 25% increase of what the feds have been giving us. The federal share of our overall budget is about 25%. So, or to give you a better idea, our overall budget is about $4 billion annually. This will be about $200 million a year more for this. So, now that's on top of what we were able to get done at the state level. So, is it enough to meet the need that's out there? No, but there is ability about how much of that elephant you can chew at once, right? So it's a great amount to get moving towards that, but there's still a tremendous amount out there. Now, that much coming in that quickly as well, too. Jim Peterson, I think he just stepped out, but was talking to me with everything else we've talked about, with every opportunity there's challenges, right? This much coming in this fast, along with, we've got the supply chain issues going on out there. Yes, there's going to be inflationary impacts on that. Is that going to cut into some of it? Yes. Does that mean that we shouldn't do this? No. Because, let's say supply chain. What's the best way to improve supply chain? Well, let's improve our ports and let's improve our transportation system, and we're doing that by spending this. So, but the way the federal government did this, like I said, in some ways it's traditional. They give us 5 years of certainty. Fantastic. But they just did it out of the general fund, and they put it in there. So this whole concept that we've had for the last 60 plus years about that we fund transportation with a user fee, and user fee has generally been, gas tax has been sort of the surrogate for usage. As we move rapidly, as the mayor just said, towards more and more electric vehicles, GM is saying by 2035 that's going to be their entire fleet. Toyota's talking about, the private sector is driving, and they're going to be doing it. So how do you fund, beyond this, a transportation sector that relies on gas tax if people aren't running their cars with gas, right? That's a huge question that's going to be out there that we bought ourselves maybe 5 years to come up with that, both at a federal level and a state level. And there's been the ideas out there before about whether you just charge on vehicle miles traveled, agnostic of how you're powering your vehicle. That would still be a user fee charge. Whether you look at more like open road tolling or those things, or whether you get rid of the user fee concept altogether and just say we're going to general fund this stuff from now on out of the same pot that we fund Medicaid and Medicare and schools and all of that. So that is a very serious issue we're going to have to grapple with, and that's coming faster than we think, because you don't flip the switch on that in the 5th year after 5. You start on that now to be able to have those conversations for that.
All right, County Executive Crowley, I'm told that you have to go, so you're dismissed. But the other people, they didn't do well enough, so they have to stick around.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity. I hope everyone enjoyed breakfast and the conversation, so thank you.
All right, I'm going to keep the question going.
We want to know, when do people look at the glasses?
Thank you very much for all your efforts today and the information you're providing. Jamie Stahulik with HDR Engineering. We're actually a new company in Madison area. So I have one quick question. The $75 million for EV vehicle infrastructure upgrade with the aging power infrastructure, is that $75 million just for the transportation infrastructure upgrades, or does a portion of that go out to the power industry as well as far as upgrading the infrastructure there? And the second question would be, do you recall what bill number that is so we can track that as well?
I'll just really quickly take the first part. That $75 million is for electric vehicle charging stations. I'll let you take that.
I'm going to ask you to connect with my chief of staff, who's standing up right over here on the bill in the legislature. She's got all the information for you.
The only other thing I'd add is that is a challenge. There's a lot of infrastructure that will have to occur with the utilities. Normally, that's a part of the regular process for the utilities to upgrade their facilities, and it becomes a part of rates. But that's another challenge we have to deal with. You know, how do we deal with those costs beyond just the cost of energy to build the infrastructure that's necessary for this new generation of vehicles?
All right, here's a question.
Hi, Jim Wood. I'm chair of Wood Communications Group, and I serve as Strategic Council for Competitive Wisconsin. Like everybody else, I want to congratulate you. I think it's been a great panel, great responses, and as a citizen, I feel good about how people are working on this set of issues. I have a couple of observations and a question. Okay? You talked about the integrated nature of infrastructure, okay? So what you do, if it doesn't work for you, if it doesn't work for others, it's eventually not going to work for you. So that's sense of things, it seems to me, is very, very important. My question is this. The question of workforce came up, and everybody wanted to talk about opportunity as opposed to problem. The bottom line is we're 100,000 jobs short in this state as it is before we start spending this money. You can't get where you need to get if you want to include everybody, if there's not more focus on recruiting people into the state of Wisconsin. Our population centers have to lead on that, because every worker that you keep in your market makes it harder for the folks in Jefferson County or Milwaukee County or someplace else to put together the infrastructure they need. So I think I'd urge you to at least consider that as you think about the workforce set of issues. The larger question, I think, or a second large question is, you are the 800-pound gorilla when we talk about money, okay? When we talk about infrastructure and what that's going to mean in terms of workforce and in terms of dollars and cents. But as a result of our vote, we now have a bunch of 400-pound or 500-pound gorillas also out there, all right? We're talking about housing, we're talking about early care and education, we're talking about specific types of workforce, like workforce transportation issues, etc. I worry, and I'm asking, what kind of effort and what kind of money is being pumped into logistical coordination? So that if you take a simple example, WEDC is offering $10,000 grants to help open up storefronts in small towns, all right? Who knows, so Bob and Sally go out, invest their life savings, open up a knitting shop, and 2 weeks later the road gets torn up. What's going on in terms of how we're coordinating and trying to understand that at the local and at the state level? Thank you again very much. You want to take the first one?
Yeah, so I can speak to just to the local level and the kinds of coordination work that we're doing. Early on in the pandemic, so I don't know how familiar you all are with the structures in local government, but when you have an emergency in local government, you stand up an emergency operations center, right? So we stood up an emergency operations center for the pandemic almost right away, and that went for over a year, which is kind of unprecedented in the emergency operations field. But early on, I looked at the non-health aspects of the pandemic and said, we need a structure that's similar to this, that's dealing with the economic impacts. And so I stood up what we call the Funding and Recovery Task Force. It's city staff, and it's their job to coordinate on a couple of fronts. One, to track the non-health impacts of the pandemic in our community, try and understand what the needs are, and try and connect those needs with our existing capacity or our existing programs. And two, to monitor the money coming in, frankly, from every level, right? So whether that was county funds from CARES, or the state funds from CARES or ARPA, or now bipartisan infrastructure law, and federal funds that are coming either directly to the city or that are eligible for people in our city, right? And to make sure that we are making folks aware, whether that's our entertainment industry or other folks, of what they can go out and get. And what money is available for them. And so we do have a group of staff who's tasked with watching this coordination and looking at the interplay of these dollars and, first and foremost, getting as many of them from Madison as possible. I'm going to be totally honest with you. But also making sure that we're as coordinated as possible, that we're braiding funding where we can, and that we're thinking about how that lands in our community. And I just think that is really important. It's something that we've been doing for over a year now. And I think to your earlier point, we are thinking a lot about how we attract and retain folks in Madison, from all different perspectives. And Madison's a great place to live. We've got incredible quality of life. But in order for us to really be serious about attracting and retaining people, we have to do the work that we're doing on housing and on transportation. And so we sort of come full circle, right? Like, the key to attracting and retaining people is making these investments in housing and transportation and our economy. And so, it's a little chicken and egg, but that's where we're at, and we're trying to do our best to make sure that Madison, and I appreciate your ambition for Milwaukee to drive the economy. Right now it's Madison that's doing that, and we're happy to do it. But we really do need to be thinking about longer term about our workforce, and we're trying to do that. But it does have to happen at the regional and state level as well.
Well, it sounds like a rivalry is brewing here now. I don't want to, come on now.
It's friendly. It's very friendly.
If I could just take the second part real quickly, the logistical challenge, Jim, of what you talked about is going to be immense, there's no doubt. We're reorganizing ourselves internally to look at coordinating with DNR, with PSC, with the different groups, WEDC, that are going to be involved. As far as the person opening up the knitting shop, that is a matter of communication. So if it's a state project, we've got a program we call In This Together, where we try to get out in the community and talk to people well before any earth's going to be moved, so that we can at least mitigate and talk about what that's going to mean to their business, and that they can plan for it. But part of the logistical coordination that we talked about at the beginning, Jeff talked about, whether we're putting out broadband, whether we're removing lead pipes, a lot of this can be done, not all of it, but some of it in the right of way. So, like Jeff said, we've got to be doing this in a way. We've got plans. We don't just decide we're going to do a road next week. We've got 6 years out. We got to plan these things so we're not tearing it up, removing water, putting down fiber optic, whatever, and then redoing the road 3 years later. That would be bad. That'd be into the bad category.
Okay, I'm going to try to squeeze in 2 more questions here. Go ahead and identify yourself.
Well, first of all, thank you for your time and insight on the infrastructure issues, as we all know that for the state to continue to grow and attract more people, infrastructure needs to get to a new level. My question relates to alternative power sources. We talked about EV, but is there any discussions regarding hydrogen? We currently import hydrogen from the state of Illinois into this state, but there are hydrogen electrolyzers that are available or being developed that can produce hydrogen. Is that part of the discussions for the infrastructure funding?
To be real frank, Mike, not from our standpoint. I mean, I think the private sector's been involved in a lot of that, but nothing specific to us in terms of funding or planning as it relates to hydrogen.
Yeah, I'm not aware of anything in the bill that's specifically, most of the energy-related things, I think, are coming through the weatherization programs, and I think that more of the energy innovation work was in Build Back Better, which, we'll see.
Okay, now the final question. All right, go ahead. Identify yourself.
John Hines, Wisconsin Environmental Initiative. I grew up on the south side of Milwaukee, and Milwaukee was the tool or die capital of the world for 100 years. And, the state has really developed a kind of a clean energy supply chain now. We've got 354 companies in the state. There's a tremendous opportunity there. So I really appreciate the discussion, the opportunity for Wisconsin the skill development. But the vast amount of these materials and technologies for wind turbines, for solar panels, for energy storage systems are coming from where? They're coming from overseas. So how can the state kind of leverage its industrial heritage, its manufacturing prowess to get a slice of, I think it's almost $9 billion in the law for clean energy manufacturing and workforce development?
So, actually, one of the things that your senator and mine, Senator Tammy Baldwin, did was make sure that there are expanded Buy America provisions in the bipartisan infrastructure law. So there is a lot of opportunity for these funds. I'm not personally familiar with all of the details, but I'm sure the senator's office would be happy to share them with you. But I do know that this actually does present a pretty promising opportunity for manufacturing in Wisconsin. Now, in the bipartisan infrastructure law, right, big chunks of the funding are coming through either transportation or water, right? So it's not so much focused on clean energy, to the previous question. But I think there is a lot of opportunity for Wisconsin manufacturers to take advantage of the work that will be generated and the projects that will come as a result of this funding. And again, that's thanks to Senator Baldwin for doing that.
So maybe we need to have a clean energy program next. All right, go ahead.
I was just going to add, I couldn't agree with you more. It was probably now close to 15 years ago, I brought a group of legislators together and said, we should lead in this area. We have a background, particularly in electronics, electrical switching, batteries. We had Johnson Controls doing battery research. We had an automotive history in this area. And I think it's one that, particularly in transportation, we can still leverage some of those advantages and make it a part of our future going forward.
Well, some of that stuff has to go through the Port of Milwaukee too, so got to build that up. All right, well, anyway, I think we're coming to the close of the program. Everybody can get on with their day now, but I really want to thank all of you for coming, asking great questions. I want to thank our panel, of course, Mayor Rhodes-Conway, Secretary Thompson of DOT, and Jeff Stone, wearing many hats here today, including Kapur. But, and also thank our sponsors, Bruce Spann and Associates, WTBA, the Wisconsin Asphalt Pavement Association, and the Transportation Development Association. So, thanks from WisPolitics and WisBusiness.com. And I don't often get to say this at an event, but go Brewers, whenever they start playing.